अरे सुना क्या? क्या?
अरे सुना नहीं क्या? अरे क्या भाई?
अरे कार्निवल आ रहा है।
कैसा कार्निवल?
कैसा नहीं, पूछो क्या क्या?
बहुत कुछ. Hottest discount on our courses, live learning, job opportunity. A perfect way to live in a pure summertime.
अरे इतना सारा?
जी हाँ, इतना सारा. See you at the Carnival.
अरे कहाँ?
डिस्काउंट लेने.
Hi everyone, good evening. I am Dhwani from GFG, Geeks for Geeks, and I'll be your host for today's session. Just give me a thumbs up in the chat if I'm perfectly audible, and let's just wait for 10 more seconds so that other people can join. Just give me a thumbs up in the chat. I'm sure a lot of you here are, wondering about what the today's topic is, because essentially it's one of the most important things a lot of CS students, a lot of engineering students think about. Like, is it coding? Like, is coding the end game or anything like that? So let's just see how this session goes on, and we'll just wait for such a few more minutes. And once a few people join, then we'll start. Till that time, for the people who have joined us, just tell us about your interests. Which fields are you from? Which streams are you from? How are you involved in coding? How do you know our today's guest? Have you been tracking our today's guest? Just let's see some enthusiasm in the chat. We are a community here, and I'm sure a lot of you have a lot of stories about how you got involved in coding. What's your experience with it? So we would love to hear about it, and we would love to take up a lot of questions in this session. So feel free to type in the questions you have in the chat, and I'm sure today's guest will be more than happy to answer all of your questions. So I welcome you all to yet another session of Geek Summer Carnival 2022. For those of you joining us for the very first time, Geek Summer Carnival 2022 is a summer carnival fiesta where you can avail amazing discounts on courses and services from GFG. So today we have a very special guest with us, and it gives me immense pleasure to welcome Piyush Agarwal. Hi, Piyush.
Hi, Dhwani. It's actually Priyansh.
Oh, sorry, Priyansh. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. How are
Not an
you?
issue, yeah. I am doing great. How are you?
I'm good too. Actually, I know a lot of Piyushs and I know a lot of Priyanshs, so the name got mixed. I'm so sorry. Please don't mind.
Not an issue. Not an
How
issue.
are you doing, Priyansh?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
That's great. So I'll just give a basic introduction, and then, we can go on with the session. So Priyansh here is a third year undergrad at IIIT Delhi, and he's pursuing a Bachelor's of Technology, majoring in Computer Science and Engineering. He is a passionate competitive programmer and is highly interested in algorithmic problem solving with a firm grasp in data structures and algorithms. He has climbed up to the top 0.3% competitive programmers in India with a rank of 20 in ICPC, that is the Olympics in Coding, Regional 2021. He is also an Android development enthusiast. So that is a profile that speaks for itself. So Priyansh, I'll just like to, I want to start this session with you giving a basic introduction of yourself. Just tell us about the domains you're interested in and what is the work you have done in them so far.
Yeah, sure. I think you've already covered pretty much everything, but I'll add up certain other things that I'm known for. So I have been doing competitive programming for the past 2.5 years, and I am a candidate master on Code Forces and a 6-star coder on CodeChef. And apart from that, I also have a summer intern offer from Goldman Sachs for the next summer. So yeah, I think that is some addition that I would like to add. Yeah.
That's a great profile. I mean, interning in your third year is like the things that everybody hopes for. So, Priyansh, can you tell us about how you got started with competitive coding and how's the journey been like?
Yeah, sure. So I think a lot of people watching this would already be knowing this, considering so many people have subscribed to my YouTube channel. So, but yeah, I'll still talk about my journey. So I started competitive programming, I would say in my second semester. So at that time, I also took a course. I mean, that was a paid course, so I wouldn't be talking about that right now. But yeah, so it's been a pretty long journey, almost 2.5 years, and now I am a candidate master and also a 6 star. So I'm not really sure if you need a detailed answer on this, like a detailed overview of my journey, but that's like an overview. Yeah.
Right. So I myself am a CS student, and like I have come across a lot of people who are not very interested in coding, but they are still in CS, and they think that like they believe that there are a lot of careers other than coding. So what's your views on that? I mean, just a basic idea of what you think about it.
I mean, definitely. As you know, in India, most people just go for engineering, and then after engineering, they decide what they need to actually do, right? So that's again, it's very similar to you pursuing, let's say, computer science in college or any other branch for that matter, and then jumping into some other career altogether. So that's totally possible. And as far as career opportunities are concerned, I think a lot of people just after the engineering they go for an MBA, so they can go to that management side as well. And apart from that, you can also prepare for government exams. So that's another thing. And recently, we've also seen that a lot of people are starting up their own startups. So that's something that another thing that is booming up. So yeah, these are certain things that you can try out apart from going for software jobs.
That was actually something worth noting. I mean, there is a lot of startup culture as of now. I mean, a lot of my friends have been, like talking about what new ideas that they have, and like the product-based companies, how like how you can develop your own product. Like that's the kind of thing they've been talking about. So I'll just drop in the first question: what are the alternatives of coding/software development jobs for CS graduates?
Yeah, I think we already covered that. We just covered that right now itself.
Except for the software development part. I mean, there is a lot of buzz about UI developers, right? So, like, what are the
Oh,
other?
okay.
Yeah,
I mean, when you talk about software development in general, so most of the companies that hire software developers, they don't specifically tell you that we'll be asking you to develop, let's say, Android apps, or we'll be asking you to develop websites. So they hire general, software developers, and whenever they're hired, so let's say now the company wants you to work on an Android app. So they might give you, let's say, 15 days to prepare and learn about Android, and then you get into actually developing stuff that is production ready, right? So as far as alternatives are concerned, you can obviously get into the design part, like. I think a lot of people do coding and then specifically the front end part. For example, you look at websites and you look at apps. So the part wherein you have to decide how they look, or how the person interacts with them. So that's one thing that you can get into if you don't want to get into software development in general. And apart from that, I'm not really sure. If you look at software development, if you are preparing for software development jobs, it covers pretty much everything, right? So if you have an overall profile, you can get into anything as such. But if you are interested in a particular domain, for example, you might be very interested in backend, or you might be really interested in Android development. So then you can get into that particular field, and deep dive into it. So that's one thing. But in general, most people just prepare on a general level for software development jobs.
right. So, since you have a lot of experience in data structures and algorithms, could you like specify a basic roadmap to how a beginner can get started, and what are the preparation strategies that a person can adopt?
Yeah, sure. So the very first thing that you need to do is first of all to learn a programming language, right? When we talk about this whole software development domain, you cannot do anything if you don't know a programming language, right? Now, you might be very good at designing, you might be very good at maths, for example, but at the end of the day, you have to write code for it, right? So the very first thing that you need to do is learn a programming language, and it kind of depends on which language do you want to start with. I mean, it kind of depends on your past experiences. For example, if you've already done, let's say, some amount of Java, or let's say some amount of Python, then it would be a good idea to start with that particular language itself. But in other cases, for example, if you've not started anything, then you can pick up Python. I would say Python is considered to be a much easier language and much easier to comprehend. So starting with Python, you can do this. And as far as DSA is concerned, I think just after you're done learning a programming language, you should try to solve a lot of basic problems on it, like very basic things like finding n factorial, finding checking whether a number is prime or not. Things that can be implemented very easily, but they do actually require you to write them in a programming language. Fine. So that's something that you can do. And apart from that, then you can get into stuff like, recursion, dynamic programming, graphs, and trees. So as far as, covering topics is concerned, you can start with recursion and then get into basic number theory, then basic binary search, and then you can start with dynamic programming as well. And then when you feel that you're at a very good level, you can go for even advanced data structures like graphs and trees and maybe tries as well. So yeah, that's something that you can do.
Right. So I personally gave a few coding tests like some time back. So I noticed that a few topics are very common in most of the tests. Like in InfiniQ, I just gave an InfiniQ exam. Most of the questions were related to strings. So do you know like what major topics are covered in most of the exams, like company based exam? Like you gave the exam for Goldman, right? So what were the major topics that were covered there?
Okay, so that's actually an interesting question. So it kind of depends on the company that you're applying for, right? So there are a hell lot of companies that are there that are hiring fresh graduates. So whenever you're applying for any company, you have to specifically look at the past interview experiences and the past problems that were asked in the coding tests, right? That will give you an idea as to which topics are actually important for this particular company, right? For example, you might be preparing for, let's say, Google, and now you are preparing on a very general level. But now let's say somebody comes up and tells you that Google is known for asking problems that are heavier on the dynamic programming side and on the graph side. So then it makes sense to cover these topics in depth, right? So my idea is to first of all look at the past interview experiences and the past coding tests. And as far as some general topics are concerned, which are applicable for all companies, I would suggest dynamic programming, graphs, and binary search. So these are three topics that are almost always asked in every single company.
Right. So I'll just drop it into a very like basic question that is asked a lot. Is it true that a person needs to be good at math to be proficient in coding and programming?
It's actually true. I mean, you have to be good at maths to be able to write code, that makes sense, right? But that said, it's not required that you prepare maths at something like a JEE advanced level. If you have your maths set till, let's say, I would say till class 10th, you should be good to go, right? So yeah, I think that pretty much answers it. You need to be good at maths, but you don't have to be at a totally advanced level to be able to perform well in programming.
So basically the amount of math that like gives you the basic problem solving ability, like you are able to form logics with that type of math. So this another question is also one that is often asked. So does mastering one coding language mean that you can do all the other languages too?
Just give me a minute. I just need to be taking a break. Just a minute.
Sure, not a problem. So for those of you in the chat, you can just like type in the questions that you have, and Priyansh would be happy to answer them all. As of now, we are discussing a very pertinent question that has been asked by a lot of people I know, and personally myself as well. So the question is, does mastering one coding language mean that you can do all the other languages too? So Priyansh,
Yeah.
Go on.
Right. So again, that's an interesting question, and the answer is yes. So the idea is that all the programming languages that are available, they have certain basic fundamentals. So if let's say you're learning a programming language like Python, now let's say you've already been doing it for I would say, let's say 5 months or 6 months, right? Now if somebody comes up and tells you to start learning C++, it will be very easy for you to switch from Python to C++, and similarly to any other language, right? So if you're done mastering one programming language, it will be very easy for you to jump into any other programming language, right? So that's I think again a very interesting point as to you should not be running after mastering all the programming languages. If you pick up a programming language, try spending a lot of time into it, and once you feel that you're very comfortable in it, you've sort of mastered it, then mark my word, you will be able to switch to any other programming language very easily.
Right. So, I mean, that's a question like a lot of people ask. So I just had to make sure that I asked this question. So, another generalized question: which language is the most up and coming right now? I mean, you have worked with a lot of languages, so which one do you think was the one that made you the most comfortable with coding?
I think it's kind of dependent on what you're doing. For example, somebody might be, into web development. So for them, if I tell them that you should learn Kotlin, it won't make sense, right? Similarly, if let's say somebody is doing Android development and I tell them to learn about React and all other, frameworks, then it won't make sense to them. Fine. So I don't think you should be, very particular about learning a single language, or you should, look for language which is booming up the most. You should look at what is the use case. So let's say somebody tells you that in the next 1 month you'll be working on Android. So it makes sense to learn about, let's say, Java or Kotlin, right? But as far as the second part of your question is concerned, wherein you asked me which language was that made me the most comfortable, I think it was C++. But that said, it can be different for anybody. I mean, for people who have been doing Python for, let's say, the last 2 years, they might be very comfortable in Python, and that would be that particular language that made them comfortable, right? So I don't think I will be, able to give a very particular answer to this question. But you should look for the use case whenever you're learning any programming language.
Right. So, since the topic of this discussion is dispelling the myths and like some pre-acquisitions that people might have, so what are the popular myths that you have heard and you have often had like the urge to correct people, like this is not right? So, what are the kind of myths that you have heard?
I think the very first myth that you already covered is that you should learn a lot of programming languages. So when I got into college, my aim was to learn almost all the programming languages. I used to wonder that if there are, let's say, 10 languages, I should learn all of them, right? But now, after being into coding for, let's say, the last 3 years, I feel that if you're comfortable with just one of them, it will be very easy for you to switch to any other, right? That's one thing. And another thing is that what a lot of people do is that whenever some of their friends are doing a particular language, they just leave their current language and they start pursuing that. So don't do that. If you are, let's say, doing C++ and everybody around you is doing Python, it's totally fine. As long as you're learning something out of it, you should continue doing that, right? So these are certain myths. And another myth is that there are companies that are very specific about programming languages. This is like a myth. People feel that if I'm applying to a particular company, this company might not allow me to code in, let's say, JavaScript, or this company might not allow me to code in Python. And this is kind of really very rare. So I don't think you should be preparing for companies and then you should be preparing a language particular to a particular company.
I also think that it's all about, like being able to code. It's not about which language you're coding. It's about, like being able to make that logic. I mean, I know there are a lot of languages. I mean, I myself can create a language. So there's no end to the number of languages there are. So I guess, yeah, that you need to be able to make the logic. So the another question is, how does language experience factor into your hiring?
I mean, it does play a big role. So let's say some company is coming up to your college, or you're applying off campus. Now, let's say the company asks you which language are you comfortable in, and now let's say you have 5 languages that you're comfortable in. You have to choose which one you are most comfortable in, right? Because that's something that you will be using when asked to code. Fine. So it does play a lot of role. I mean, I would always prefer somebody who has worked on a particular language for more than 6 months than somebody who has worked on 5 different languages for one month each. So it's very important that if you're into a programming language, you deep dive into it. You learn exactly how everything works at the back end inside that programming language, right? So it does play a very big role.
Right. So how to, like how does a person who is not, like who does not have a lot of time to surf Google all the time, how does a person like that keep up with the new trends and advancements in the fields?
I think you should definitely read technical blogs and articles. That's one thing. For example, a lot of people might be knowing that things like Web3 are coming up nowadays, right? So if you're really aware about it, then you might get into stuff like blockchain. Fine. So the idea is to be aware about what is coming up, and you can do that by reading a lot of technical blogs and articles, and also basically keeping a check on certain YouTube channels that post a lot of stuff that is related to new techs coming up, right? And yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. Like being aware is to just follow certain technical blogs and articles.
Right. So while going through your profile, I actually saw that you too have a YouTube channel. I'm sure you post a lot of stuff about what the new advancements are, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience already follow you. But for those of you who don't, you can check out Priyansh's page, and so. There's this one question that has come up a lot of times whenever I've talked to people. So it's, which language is ideal for a beginner to start coding?
I think you should start with Python. Python is considered to be really easy to catch. So it's very related to English. If you're writing something in Python, it might feel as, it might, just feel like you're writing English. So I would say you can start with Python. But then after, let's say, you want to get into some object-oriented programming language, then I would say start with Java, right? So these are certain two languages that you can start with, preferably Python.
Right. So actually, I differ here a bit because I started with C, C++, and I just think that in Python, you get a lot of pre-made packages, so you don't have to code the logic for that. So
Mhm.
yes, I have worked with Python, and I know it's very easy to work with. I mean, once you start getting the hang of it, it's really easy to work with it. So, Priyansh, can you tell us a little bit about how your interview procedure was and how your interview went? What were the rounds? How was your experience with that?
Okay, so I have, interviewed only with Goldman Sachs. So I'll tell you about my interview experience at Goldman Sachs. So it was like, there was a coding test, and that coding test had two DSA problems, and then there were also questions on aptitude and CS fundamentals. So it was also an on-campus opportunity. So I was able to clear the coding test, and after that there were three interview rounds. All these were technical. I did not have an HR round, and as far as the questions in these technical interviews are concerned, they were all around DSA. And specifically for companies that are like fintech companies, you also need to prepare something called puzzles, right? For companies like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, these companies always ask puzzles in their interview rounds as well. So if you're applying for a fintech company, I would highly suggest you to prepare puzzles, and for that you can definitely check out Geeks for Geeks puzzle section. I personally prepared from the Geeks for Geeks puzzle section itself, and yeah, I mean, most of it was DSA, some of it was OOPS as well, and then there were puzzles and a little bit of aptitude as well in the interviews.
Right. So, also, what are the kind of projects that you are currently working on? Like, what are your recent projects or the project that gave you the most success?
That's actually a very interesting question. I am not working on any project at the moment, and for people who are in the audience, a lot of them might be knowing that I'm totally into competitive programming. So I'm not a lot into software development or making projects. So yeah, right now I'm not working on any project. And as far as the projects in my resume are concerned, they're also pretty basic. So all of these projects that I've added in my resume just took me around, I would say, a week. I would say not more than that to make them. So I don't have any major projects in my resume. Most of my resume is covered with competitive programming achievements.
Like, that's a new thing that I've heard. I mean, that's great. So, I guess that's it for the questions that I have. So, would you like to give some footnote to the audience, like some ending note? So, just some motivation at the end.
Sure, I think we can cover that after we're done answering some doubts from the chat. Maybe we can have some doubts from the chat, and then I can give some ending note.
Right. So, we can look into the chat. I don't really see a lot of questions, but okay. We have. Mm, we have this one question, like, since you are actually working on Android development, there's a question that how to cover the basics of Android app development, and what are the languages that a beginner should start with?
Sure, that's an interesting question again. I haven't got this till now, right? So as far as Android development is concerned, I started with Java, but right now, if you look at Android development, most people are doing it in Kotlin, and Kotlin is much simpler to write than Java, right? So if you want to get into Android development, maybe you can start with Kotlin. And I think there are a lot of free resources, a lot of free playlists that are available on YouTube. So for Kotlin, you can check out that. And as far as going into Android development particularly is concerned, I did a course from Udemy. I'm not kind of able to remember the course name, but it was by an instructor called Rob Percival. So you can check out that course. And actually, that course is in Java, but you can cover those same things in Kotlin as well if you're very good with Kotlin, right? And I think you would be spending around 2 to 3 months learning about Android, and then you can get into some independent projects that you can make.
Right. So there's another question like, what is the strategy for core branch students? Like, what are the things that they should work on in their like first year and the second year so that, like they can secure good work, good internships in their third year? So, what is the strategy there?
Okay, so if you're talking about core branches, do you mean branches like, let's say, ECE and mechanical? And are you referring to them applying in software companies, or them applying in, let's say, their own
I'm
core
referring to the
companies?
CS students only, but what are the process? Like we're in third year, so we, like we have certain basic roadmap. We have understood from our mistakes in the past 2 years, and like we have started to get the hang of it. So for those of our juniors who have, like just started their engineering, what are your, like suggestions to them?
Okay, for them, I think the very first thing that you should look at is what is your aim. For example, some people might want to get into research. For them, going and deep diving into DSA would not make a lot of sense, right? And for somebody who, let's say, wants to apply for placements and internships, then deep diving into DSA does make a lot of sense. Fine. So I think I would answer this, from a perspective wherein you are thinking of applying for placements, right? So in that case, first of all, you need to look at certain CS fundamentals that are taught in your college and will also be useful in your internship. For example, topics like operating systems, DBMS, and computer networks. So there are certain topics that are taught in colleges, and you need to do them thoroughly. But then there are certain courses or certain topics that are also taught in colleges, but they don't have a lot of value as far as internships and placements are concerned, right? So I think you need to first of all look at what your aim is, and if you are aiming for a good placement or an internship, then look at all the topics that will be required in the internship or the placement, right? And then when it is taught in your college, do them properly. And as far as the other topics are concerned, I don't think you should be giving a lot of time to them if that is not your goal.
Right. So there's this question, I don't really know about what the like platform they're asking about, but how to crack Facebook Hacker Cup round using 6 months of CP experience.
Okay, again, a very interesting question. The answer is you cannot. So, if you are into competitive programming and you've been only doing it for the past 6 months, Facebook Hacker Cup is like a really advanced competitive programming round or a contest. So, I don't really suggest people who have less than 1 year of experience to be even expecting something out of Facebook Hacker Cup. So, when I started competitive programming in my first year, when I gave the Facebook Hacker Cup for the first time, I was, I think, able to clear the qualification round. I don't even remember. So, maybe the qualification round, but when I went into the round one, I realized that the questions are really above my level. So last year itself, I went on till round two, and this was particularly because I had already spent around 2 years in competitive programming, right? So for people who are asking about Facebook Hacker Cup, if you are already into CP for, let's say, the last 1.5 years or 2 years, then it makes sense to go for it. And I think if you've already been doing CP for such a long time, you will be able to crack Facebook Hacker Cup and reach till round two at least. But just in case, if you're a beginner, I would suggest trying out Google Kickstart rounds instead of Facebook Hacker Cup or, let's say, Google Code Jam.
Right. So from the perspective of placements, should one, like focus on the competitive program like you did, or should one focus on the project side?
That's actually really subjective. If you're interested in development, if you're interested in, let's say, web development or Android development, then you can, craft your resume in a way that it contains a lot of projects and it displays your development skills. But let's say you're not really interested in development like myself, and you're interested in, let's say, competitive programming. So then again, it's not a harm to do competitive programming a lot and do projects really less. So it's totally up to your interest. If you're finding interest in competitive programming, do it for a considerable amount of time, and you will have a very good resume and you'll have a very good profile. Similarly, if you're into development, I would suggest you do it for a very long time. Try out stuff like Google Summer of Code, and you will have a very good resume and a profile again. Anything can be done, but just do it, make a deep dive into it.
Right. So you mentioned blockchain. So have you worked on it? Like, have you?
No.
Okay.
I haven't really worked on any development stuff.
Yeah. So I guess that's it from the question from the audience as well. So would you like to say something at the end, like some footnote for the audience?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, don't get scared out of all the stuff that is happening around you. Let's say somebody is into competitive programming, they might feel like everybody around them is doing web development, Android development, machine learning, blockchain. don't get overwhelmed by this. If you're into a particular field, do this, do that particular field. Don't be distracted with the other fields. And the other thing is, don't go after running a lot of programming languages. I think we've already talked about it a lot of times. So pick up a programming language, make a deep dive into it, do it for a considerable amount of time, and whenever somebody asks you to, let's say, switch to another programming language, it will be very easy for you if you are comfortable with the basics, right? So yeah, that's an ending note from my side.
Well, so that explains a lot, Priyansh. Thank you so much for such an informative session and for answering all the questions. For those of you in the audience, you can connect with him on his LinkedIn and subscribe to his YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And if you wish to be a part of other sessions and avail the benefits of GSC 2022, then you can check the links in description. Just a heads up, only a few days are left. So just make sure that you go through all those links. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much, Priyansh, again. And I hope you all have a great day ahead. Thank you so much.